Our first guest is, as Neil said, a very busy government minister who has always seen tourism as central to her multifaceted portfolio. Here for her fifth and final year, please welcome to the stage Minister for Tourism, Culture, Arts, Gaeltacht, Sport and Media, Catherine Martin TD. We meet again.
Hello again, yes. How are you?
You're very welcome. Your fifth and last time in this electoral cycle, at least. If you pardon the pun, it's been quite the journey for you.
It has. I came in the end of June 2020, and for this sector in particular, a very difficult sector. I would like just firstly wish ITIC a happy 40th birthday and just say it is a busy week, but I'm delighted to be here. And just to say that I think a hallmark of the last 4 years was how the engagement, the really constructive engagement with ITIC through the horrors of COVID. Just when we felt we'd got through that, and I think we got through that together and navigating and listening to each other and finding out the supports that would best help the sector, then the cost pressures emerged. So it's that constant engagement, I suppose, is what's key, and I just want to thank ITIC for that.
We're still trailing, even as of today, on the pre-COVID levels. We're still below those. We saw in the video and all of the speakers were talking about, that the difficulty of the Irish tourism sector, because North America is strong, other markets are soft, but when many businesses generally are treading water, other parts of the economy are booming. And if you look at those kind of big macro figures, it's sending mixed messages about Ireland. But cost and capacity are huge headaches. On their own, they would be onerous enough. Inflation, energy, the sick pay, the auto-enrolment of pensions, on their own are onerous, but together are adding up to huge potential liabilities for businesses.
Yes, and I am very aware of the significant concerns and real concerns of everyone in this room, and especially this year, I suppose the beginning of the year looked a bit better for visitor numbers, but then it seemed to sort of flatline, and then there's the cost pressures, and that's why we did, reintroduce the cost of business grant and had that second rate or second payment for hospitality and retail sectors, and adjustments to PRSI, the 10,000 max increase to 10,000 for the energy efficiency. But ITIC are doing meaningful engagement with myself and with other relevant ministers. The government is very cognizant of the concerns, and it is a priority in the negotiations and going into the announcement next week.
Obviously, labour policy changes are very, very important for employers and employees alike, but if you're looking at a potential add to the bill, the labour, through all of these various labour policies of 1.4 billion out to 2026, that is a huge cost for businesses to bear at a time when many of them are treading water.
Yes, and that's what myself and Minister Coveney and then former Minister Coveney and then Minister Burke have heard through the engagement again in the Tourism and Hospitality Forum, that felt it was just too much happening at once, while other costs were hitting them and challenges. And that is something that Minister Burke is looking at to see how best he can address that.
Well, there's one measure I will talk to you about, and that is, of course, is it a question of the lady not for turning or the entire cabinet table not for turning on the VAT rate? We've heard it incessantly in recent weeks and months that for many businesses in tourism that the restoration of the VAT rate is absolutely critical.
Yep, that's what we've heard from ITIC and from all the stakeholders. And although hospitality isn't under my remit, it's under Minister Burke, it is formed a really important part of the tourism ecosystem.
It's a huge part of the
system. Absolutely, and I recognise that. It is ultimately a matter for the Minister for Finance, and it is something that's been discussed.
Because often, a temporary measure is brought in at difficult times, and then it's very, very hard to find, well, at what time, the USC was brought in as a temporary measure, and we're still, living with that. So sometimes the emergency becomes a temporary, but then becomes a critical business support. Is just the question amongst your colleagues just that the full year cost of it is unsustainable, so that now is the time to do it? Or are you sitting going, well, actually look at all of these other costs that businesses are facing. Is this the right time?
Well, it was a temporary measure during COVID to support the industry, but during those years of COVID, it was actually it cost 1.2 billion. So that's what the Minister for Finance is examining, the cost of that, and for it to be brought in for food, it's still almost a lot of that is still there, saying the vast majority of it would be towards food. So that's what he's weighing up now. For me, my priority is getting supports to everyone here that best helps them, and through the agencies, making sure that Tourism Ireland and Fáilte Ireland have the money to give the support where it's needed as well.
What other business initiatives are we likely to see that are going to cushion that blow or soften the blow? Because, as you saw in the video, the issues for many businesses are very, very stark. They either pass it on to consumers, which is its own sort of vicious cycle, or the alternative is you try and absorb the cost, and then that could push, barely viable businesses, and some businesses that aren't viable have to fall. That's economics, but that's a very, very tricky balance.
Yep, and I can't speak for Minister Burke in Detty, but I'm sure he is examining and engaging with Minister Donoghue and with Minister Chambers on the best supports he can put in place. As I said, ITIC has engaged with all the relevant ministers, and this is a priority for all of government to see what a package we can put together. But for myself, it's the agencies. It's for example, what we saw there in the video. So we can see that our European market, our GB market, has fallen. Do we need to put more money into marketing to help Tourism Ireland market there? Is that they need more money for that targeting of market? Is it product development? Is it the resilience of the retention and recruitment of crew? Is it digitalisation? That's what the agencies can do, and that's where my focus is on.
Can we talk about capacity, not just the issue of the Dublin passenger cap, which we will get to, but it's a rapidly expanding population. We know that there's need to build hotels, that there are other capacity blockages in there. It's popped up in Neil's speech. Will those new short-term lets, the legislation on short-term lets, is that going to pose a threat to rural tourism, and especially when most of the jobs are outside of the capital? Is that going to pose a threat to them? And what are we going to do to make sure that the measure that's been introduced to address one harm doesn't cause undue harm elsewhere?
Well, the short-term legislation is not about being anti-rural tourism, because we see that 70% of our jobs in this Indigenous industry are in the regions. It really thrives in rural Ireland, but it's trying to strike that balance between tourism needs and housing needs. And you do see some...
when there's going to be a registration system, and people say, well, that actually will affect the capacity and availability for rural tourism. I'm not saying it's an easy thing to do.
And that's where the planning guidelines are key here, and this has been emphasised with the Department of Housing and the Minister, so that the planning guidelines strike that balance between tourism and housing, and Minister Bryan is working on that, and they will be published together with the bill. But as I said, even industry itself has problems with accommodation of the people who work in the industry, so there's a significant issue there, but it's striking that balance. And I said the aim is not to be anti-rural tourism, because it's in the regions that the
and also just that separate but related issue, obviously Ireland's response to accommodating refugees from Ukraine, and obviously that other pressure for international protection. Is that number coming down? Are you seeking to try and free up some of that blockage as well?
Yeah, but I think you'd know from the previous conferences that's not the number one issue here for the industry as it was maybe last year and the year before.
That ecosystem.
There's more accommodation freeing up, but more certainly needed for tourism. But I think that's because Minister Gorman is working on alternative accommodation to help those who are fleeing horrific circumstances, and we do want to, as part of that humanitarian. I suppose it's us as a nation reaching out and supporting those who need support.
You very helpfully mentioned planning, so we need to talk about Santry. And I want to bring us back to the origin of the Dublin passenger cap issue, because obviously your predecessor, I suppose, delisted Dublin Airport from critical infrastructure planning when they hived off, the issue of noise planning to Fingal and to elsewhere. And arguably, even if it was well-intentioned, do you think in hindsight that was an absolutely massive mistake to essentially delist Dublin Airport, which is a major important national infrastructure, and leave it to local planning?
Well, I think firstly, just to say that I'm very cognizant as Minister for Tourism of the incredible importance of air connectivity and air links. We're an island after all, and if tourism is one of our most important indigenous industries, that air connectivity is key. And obviously that has led to major constraints at Dublin Airport. But having said that, I'm also aware of there's not that capacity constraints in the regions. And again, if I look at the video earlier on, 70% of the employment is in the regions. And I think we should be looking at, there are opportunities there, whilst the planning issue is being dealt with, to develop Shannon and
your
Cork.
colleague, Minister James Lawless, has been out and trying to say everybody, you should just be moving them away to the regional airports, which are
And
which
what's
are ready and willing.
interesting in that, Derval, is that some research has shown that 38% of visitors who arrive in Dublin go west. So would it not make more sense if they could just arrive west where we have pre-clearance?
Airlines choose Dublin. One of the suggestions, is that there could be a ministerial order that would somehow go in and override the planning system. Can you see that? Is that a non-runner to take essentially an emergency order like that?
Well, both ministers have said it can't be done. I know that's what's been suggested by someone, but both ministers have said it can't, and it's a planning issue. And as I said, I am cognizant of the air connectivity, but it's a planning issue, and I'm certainly not going to go back to the years gone by where politicians interfered with planning. We have to let it go through that process. And that's the way I think it should be. You can't have politicians mixing with planning, but that SI, I've been told by the ministers it can't be done.
But surely around the cabinet table, you're kind of saying this is a major, national infrastructure. Can it be that this is caught up? The DA, recently Minister Ryan, your party leader, said in RT that the DA could have moved faster. Could they and could any of the parties move faster in this dispute?
Well, it does sound like that's where the delay happened, was in the submitting of that planning application, which was nothing to do with government, but the DAA. So that's an unfortunate thing, and now we're living with that capacity constraint.
If we acknowledge how we get into the mess, how are we going to get out of it? And how are we going to move those passengers? Because the original passenger cap had nothing to do with emissions per se, but it has inevitably, and you're a Green Party minister, it has inevitably become part of the conversation. We had, well-meaning protesters here today, and it has become tied in with that environmental issue. So, even without tourism growth, we've rapid population growth. So we do need to look at connectivity for the entirety of the island. Is it good enough just to say, look, this is a local planning matter, and we'll leave it until it's all sorted out at that level?
Well, we do have to respect the planning process, and it's the facts that we're dealing with is the planning application seemed to there was a delay submitting it, and now we're dealing with that now. But the planning process has to be respected by politicians and cannot be interfered with. And that's why I'm saying I think there's a regional benefit for regional tourism here, an opportunity. If Shannon, which has the pre-clearance for our big spenders, the US coming into there, I think would be really good for regional tourism, for rural tourism. And we're talking about those big spenders coming in to do longer stays, and that's where rural Ireland has everything to offer.
How are we going to sort of support or facilitate that decant?
Sorry?
If that decant were to happen, how are we going to do that? Because, we're hearing very, very serious, threats of economic harm. There is a very, very strong message going about, the island of Ireland and people not being able to get, slots next year. The reality is so much.
Yeah, and we can look at the cooperative agreements with the airlines. We can look at how we market Shannon and Cork as destinations to arrive into. And as I said, if the visitors really aware that those 38% who are going west, that they can land in Shannon and Cork and be in the heart of where they're going to travel anyhow.
At the heart of today's conference is one question that's going to come up time and time again. Can you grow? Can the government help support the ambition of the sector to grow whilst at the same time being mindful of its obligations? Is that mutually exclusive? I know there's a new tourism policy due very shortly.
It is exactly as ITICConf said, it's about that responsible ambition, and I think there are massive opportunities. That new policy that we are developing is about societal, environmental and economic sustainability of tourism. I think there's wonderful opportunities here in Ireland to be leaders in that. I think the industry are ready, willing and able to embrace it. It's about putting the supports in place.
I was just going to say, are they
to help them?
enough?
Yeah, and that's what we have to look at in this policy and in the supports that follow in the implementation of any recommendations to is how you know, with those solar grants, the retrofitting, the low carbon. Is it marketing to the regions that are the bigger spends but the lower carbon footprint? Is there target marketing that needs to happen there? Do we look at slow tourism, which could be a win-win for rural Ireland, so that we're saying to people, rather than trying to do 25 things in your itinerary, head into rural Ireland and really spend time in the locality, exploring the local food, the local culture, getting to know the people, the music. There's massive sales. When you think of that image of Ireland, that Tourism Ireland do such a brilliant job on promoting Ireland, that is, you know, really, it's really that slow tourism, ecotourism, like.
Well, what kind of initiatives, though, that are going to be brought in? Because, you know, there's been a huge sort of attack against kind of, you know, wokeism, the whole ESG agenda. How are we going to get the incentives that it makes good commercial sense?
Well, we have to support the tourism enterprises. Government has to do that to make it easier for them to go green, to have that low carbon footprint to be, or carbon neutral indeed. And then I think the tourists themselves, this is what they are looking for. So we need to make sure that they know where to find the low carbon footprint tourism, or look at the transport links and the cycling by public transport, by train, making everything easier. The EV infrastructure, if it's car rental, and looking at how that can be supported to get more EVs into that car rental market too.
You've been a full term in the role. I mean, you know, you're talking about, you know, the infrastructure, and when you start talking about tourism, you're talking about so many different areas. It's about the economics, it's about the trade, it's about the culture. Is it time to put it into an economic portfolio? And I know it's a question I've asked you probably before, but given that kind of the, you know, whether it is planning, Dublin Airport, or just the whole array, and the business supports in particular, is it time that it should be in an economic portfolio? In your view, somebody who's had a very busy portfolio.
I've heard people make that argument, and I reckon that's something that will be discussed when the next government is being formed. But what I can say from my part, having done the tourism trade missions in many parts of the world, it actually makes an awful lot of sense to have tourism with sport and culture and the arts, because when we're promoting tourism in Ireland, they're what we're promoting. So I can really see the argument for keeping it where it is too. But as I said, that'll be ultimately for the next government year and programme for government talks to discuss that.
I wanted to talk to you about just there's a lot of sort of conflicting messages going out about Ireland at the minute. So the macro figures are very good. On the ground, it's very different. Business costs. But one of the things just even this summer, I had a brilliant opportunity to do a lot of staycationing in Ireland. We've been doing tours in our home time with my nieces and nephews. So I got to see the amazing value of our tourism sector. But I was recently at the Coldplay concert where Chris Martin apologised to the audience in Croke Park for hotels and the cost of tickets, and he got huge applause to it. And there is that other side. Is there a reputational risk that perhaps when it comes to big events like that we are jeopardising our value for money proposition? What do you think of that, and what do you say to that?
That's where we have to be really careful, because there's no doubt we are seeing those the prices go up during major sporting events or music events.
Dynamic pricing.
Yeah, and we just need to be really careful of that, because that can do reputational damage. So, you know, I'd always plead to people to think that when the visitors come, key is we want them to come back again. The value for money is also key to our market in attracting people to come back again. So we can't interfere with those costs and how they're set. But I think they need to be very careful when the prices, you know, setting those prices to think about value for money and how it impacts our tourists coming back.
Yeah. Can I ask you just about your time in the portfolio? What are you most proud of, and what would you, if you could go back and change it, what would, you know, when you reflect kind of on the highs and lows of running the brief?
And with tourism, I think I'm proudest of the engagement, the collaboration that we've had. And I think I was only about 2 days in, and I met with the Tourism Task Force at the time, and I realised immediately how how much I needed to engage and to listen and respond. And I would hope that will go forward, no matter who the next minister is, to continue that. I think it's just been so effective, and I think setting up the Hospitality and Tourism Forum was seen as a COVID forum, but we've kept it going, and I think that has been a really good decision, because as we see, there are more challenges, and challenges are ever changing in this industry. If you to look at the last few conferences, Dervin, we've been here, there's challenges of a different nature each time for this industry, and we have to always remember how important tourism is to Ireland. It's over 250,000 jobs. How important it is to rural Ireland. Some people think of tourism, just think of Dublin.
Most of the jobs are outside.
It's outside Dublin, 70%. So that engagement is critical. And I hope that forum goes forward.
For tourism, do you think? You know, even when you look at the figures this morning, still whatever 6% below sort of pre-COVID levels. So even after all of the measures, there is a big pandemic overhang. You know, what kind of, on a scale of 0 to 10, what's your sense of maybe does that sort of sense of emergency in terms of the task force, does that collaboration need to continue at that level, or do you think it's...
That's why I think that forum needs to continue, because the industry have got through, and tourism has proven time and time again to be resilient, but it can only be resilient if a government supports it in its resilience, because the people, and we have the natural assets and the heritage items and the beautiful landscape, but the people who work in the industry are key to tourism's success, and we need to support that tourism. And any government can only know how to support if they listen to the industry. And that's why I'm saying I think that has been the most important learning for me, and across all my sectors has been that engagement. But it started first on my second day with tourism.
What did you not get right?
Oh, you can never get everything right, I suppose, in any industry. So I think it's just trying I think my learning is just to try and keep engaging with the other ministers to make sure that the concerns are heard.
You said, very interestingly, whoever the next tourism minister will be. And one of the really interesting and for many people very, very worrying trends in the lead up to this general election, you're free to share the date if you have it there. But
as is anyone else.
As is anyone else.
I'm curious.
But, I was speaking at an event earlier this year with the former Taoiseach Mary Harney, and she for International Women's Day, and she expressed real concern at the number of TDs, largely but not exclusively male, but the number of TDs and very, very senior politicians, including a former Taoiseach, a former Taoiseach, who are leaving the field. I know that you yourself have spoken about some of the toxic elements, whether it's from media or otherwise. You didn't run for the party leadership. Are you going to run again after the election? Do you want another time in the Dáil or around the cabinet table?
Well, what I said at the time is that and I've always said this as a woman in politics, you never rule anything out, because that's the wrong message to give young girls who are looking in and watching, and we want to encourage more to get involved. But it just wasn't for me at this time. I'm absolutely focused. It's there's a lot of pressures in various elements of my briefs. The stakeholders need my support and they need my focus there. And I'm also very focused on my constituency as well to get re-elected, because I want to stay in politics. It's been challenging, but I've enjoyed it, and I like to be in a position to help, and I see that in politics. But I'd never rule it out. But I would say that I do feel Minister O'Gorman is doing a fantastic job as our leader, and I would see him getting re-elected and beyond.
But just on that, but for women and also for men in politics, did it get tougher over that period of time? Is it tough going on your personal as well as your professional life?
As a woman in politics? It is absolutely. Yeah.
Woman in public life?
Yeah, it is. And then I suppose when you're a member of government, there's more recognition just daily on the streets, which maybe I wouldn't have had in 2016 to 2020. So people know who you are. So you're always afraid of the angry approach. It's not just on social media. And of course, I've 3 children who are teens who are more tuned into what their mother is going through than they would have been in my previous Dáil term. And I have to be cognizant of that and protecting them too. But ultimately, I feel it's really important to stick at it. And we need more women in here. Maybe that's why I've done so much engagement.
Is that a yes to my question then? You'll be running again?
Well, I'm definitely running in the next general election, whenever that might be. Absolutely. Ask anyone in Dublin Rathdown. I'm always on the doors and continue to do so. And as for leader of the party, as I said, never say never, but I've full confidence in Minister O'Gorman, and I think he's doing a great job.
Are you happy with the Greens' record in government?
Absolutely.
And will they be around the table again, do you think? Just in terms of the, right across Europe, in this consequential year, polls, the Greens have struggled as a movement right across. They seem to have been sort of the victim of a lot of sort of political machinations. Do you think you've embedded yourselves enough, or do you think that that you'll be punished or, I suppose, applauded at the next election?
Traditionally, the smaller party in government is always punished, but I would say I think the biggest complaint when I listen to opposition is that the Greens have had too much power and have been running rings around everyone. And I heard someone complain in opposition, they're doing exactly what they said they do. Well, that was the complaint, and I was like, yes, we are exactly as it says on the tin, but there's much more to us than the green agenda. Of course, urgent climate action, but that you can't have climate justice without social justice. And you can see various elements in my brief as well. Like I'd always talk about the basic income for the arts and valuing the arts, which again is helping tourism, because people are talking about that abroad, and that's good for Ireland's image whilst we're supporting our artists. So yeah, I'm very proud of our legacy. Let's see what the electorate do in the next election. I'm hoping Dublin Rathdown will seek to return me and see that I stand by my track record, and I always at the doors I'll only talk to what I've achieved. I don't talk about other politicians. I don't talk about what I have done and what my vision is going forward. And I'm hoping that will work for me, and I'd be confident you'll see more Greens there. And we are never afraid to go into government. We're never afraid to take that difficult steps where others aren't, because you can implement change in government. If I hadn't got into government, I'd never have got to meet the wonderful people in this industry and learn so much about it and have that positive engagement and help. It's an amazing privilege, actually, Derval, to be in a position to help a sector like this through the most difficult of times. And I always say when on those tourism trade missions, it's the most amazing privilege to sell Ireland as a tourism destination. It's like the easiest of sells.
Mr. Martin, I have a tendency of adding about 10 minutes to any conversation that we have. I have one more question, and I won't do that to you today, but I do have one more question. Just of all of the contributions, Adrian Cummins says, it's right up to the, so much of the budget is leaked, but it's right up to the final hour when you can get to use your influence. Will you be using that to hit on the big issues, including will you be fighting for the restoration of the VAT rate, for example, right up until that hour, or do you accept that is something that's just...
Look, I'll be fighting up right to the final hour if it needs be for the sector and for all areas under my remit. But as I said, that is ultimately a matter for the Minister for Finance, there is absolute recognition of what the sector, the challenges that they're facing right now, of the people who work in the sector, the amazing people who work in the sector as well. And you will see a whole of government approach to this in the budget.
Well, I was going to say, until the next time, who knows? Can you say until after happens? Best of luck in the election. Because we've now confirmed she's running. And thank you very much, and thank you for all of your time over the years. So please give a warm round of applause to the Minister. Thank you.